The rain hammered against the pavement like bullets, each drop exploding into 1,000 smaller pieces that soaked through my worn sneakers. I stood at the crosswalk on Fifth Avenue, one hand clutching a plastic bag filled with discount groceries, the other pressed protectively against the small swell of my belly hidden beneath an oversized coat. The walk signal blinked its countdown. 10 seconds, 9 seconds. But my feet felt cemented to the ground, exhaustion seeping into my bones like the cold November rain seeping through my clothes. 6 months. 6 months since I'd signed those papers with trembling hands, since I'd walked away from the marble fortress that had been my prison, since I'd last seen him. 6 months since I'd chosen freedom over gilded chains, poverty over suffocation, uncertainty over the terrifying certainty of belonging to Dante Moretti. The crosswalk signal turned red just as I stepped off the curb. Horns blared. Tires screeched against wet asphalt. I froze in the middle of the street, my bag slipping from numb fingers, oranges rolling across the painted lines like small orange planets escaping orbit. That's when I saw it. The black SUV with tinted windows, flanked by 2 identical vehicles, all 3 stopping in perfect synchronization despite having the green light. The rear door of the center vehicle opened. Even through the rain, even across the distance of several car lengths, I recognized the Italian leather shoes first. Custom-made, obscenely expensive, utterly impractical for New York weather. Then the charcoal suit, tailored so precisely it looked painted onto his frame. Finally, as he stepped fully out of the vehicle, ignoring the chaos of honking cars and confused pedestrians, I saw his face. Dante. Time collapsed. The rain seemed to suspend in midair. Every sound muffled except for the thundering of my own heartbeat. His dark eyes, those eyes that had once traced every inch of my skin, that had watched me with possession and something dangerously close to tenderness, locked onto mine with an intensity that made my knees buckle. His jaw tightened. Even from this distance, I could see the muscle there jump, could recognize the barely controlled violence in the set of his shoulders. 2 men emerged from the front of his SUV, earpieces visible, hands already moving toward concealed weapons as they scanned the intersection for threats. Dante raised one hand, a subtle gesture that froze them in place. His gaze never leaving mine. I needed to move, needed to run, needed to protect the secret growing inside me. But my body betrayed me, paralyzed by the weight of his stare, by the memories flooding back uninvited. The scent of his cologne, bergamot and cedar and something darker. Something that had always reminded me of gunpowder and sin, the feel of his hands, gentle despite their capacity for violence, tracing the curve of my spine in the darkness of our bedroom, the sound of his voice, velvet-wrapped steel, whispering promises that were also threats. You belong to me, Mia, always. A car horn blared directly beside me, startling me back to reality. I stumbled forward, my coat shifting, and that's when it happened. When everything shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces, the wind caught the fabric, pulling it tight against my body for just a moment. Just long enough. Dante's expression transformed, his eyes dropped to my midsection, and I watched, helpless, terrified, as recognition crashed across his face like a wave against rocks. His skin went pale beneath his olive complexion. His hand, halfway raised as if to reach for me across the impossible distance, clenched into a fist so tight I could see his knuckles go white even through the rain. No, I whispered, though the word was swallowed by thunder rumbling overhead. His lips moved, forming my name, and even though I couldn't hear him over the chaos of the intersection, I felt it like a physical touch. The way his mouth shaped those 2 syllables that he'd spoken against my skin countless times, in pleasure and in anger, and in that dangerous space between the 2. One of his men leaned toward him, speaking urgently into his ear. Dante's jaw worked, his attention splitting between me and whatever information he was receiving. The traffic lights cycled. Cars began moving again, flowing between us like a river of steel and glass, cutting off his view. I ran. My feet found purpose, carrying me across the remaining lanes, onto the sidewalk, into the maze of pedestrians rushing through the rain, with newspapers held over their heads. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard, I thought it might break free. Behind me, I heard shouting, sharp commands in Italian, the heavy footfalls of men trained to hunt, to capture, to eliminate obstacles. I ducked into the subway entrance on 42nd Street, taking the stairs 2 at a time, despite the protest in my lower back, despite the cramping in my calves. The underground station swallowed me, a concrete womb filled with the smell of hot metal and humanity, the screech of arriving trains, the echoing announcements that nobody listened to anymore. The platform was crowded with evening commuters. I pressed myself into the middle of the throng, pulling my hood up, making myself small. Invisible. Everything I'd learned to be in the months before I'd left him, when I was planning my escape from the Moretti Empire. A train arrived with a rush of stale air. Doors opened. People pushed forward. "Mia!" His voice cut through everything, through the noise, through the crowd, through the 6 months of silence and distance I'd so carefully constructed. I turned, unable to stop myself, and saw him at the top of the stairs. His suit was soaked, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, and his eyes, God, his eyes burned with an emotion so intense it made my stomach twist. Fury, betrayal, and something else, something that looked almost like pain. 3 men in dark suits flanked him, one speaking urgently into a phone, another scanning the crowd with the predatory focus of a trained killer. But Dante didn't move. He just stood there, water dripping from his expensive clothes, staring at me as if I were a ghost he'd conjured from his own nightmares. Our eyes met across the platform. The crowd surged forward, carrying me with them into the train car. I pressed against the window, my palm flat against the cold glass, unable to look away from him even as the doors began to close. He moved then. Fast. The crowd parted before him, like he was Moses, and they were the Red Sea. Nobody wanted to be in Dante Moretti's path when he wore that expression. His men followed, shoving people aside with professional efficiency that bordered on violence. The doors slid shut, just as he reached them. His hand slammed against the metal, the sound sharp enough to make nearby passengers flinch. His face was inches from mine, separated only by the glass and the 6 months of lies I'd built between us. His lips moved, forming words I could see but not hear over the train's departing screech. "You're carrying my child," not a question. A statement. An accusation. A claim. The train lurched forward, pulling me away from him, but his eyes followed, dark and furious and filled with a promise that made my blood run cold. He pulled out his phone with movements that were too controlled, too deliberate. I knew that look. Knew what it meant when Dante Moretti shifted from emotion to action, from feeling to hunting. As the tunnel swallowed the train into darkness, as the platform and Dante's figure disappeared from view, I slid down against the wall of the car until I was sitting on the floor, my knees drawn up as much as my growing belly would allow. My hands shook as I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to contain the trembling that had nothing to do with the cold and everything to do with the terror flooding my veins. Other passengers stared at me with varying degrees of concern and annoyance, but I barely registered them. All I could see was Dante's face. All I could feel was the weight of his gaze, the promise in his eyes. He knew. After 6 months of hiding, of building a new life in the shadows of the city where he ruled like a dark king, of protecting the tiny life growing inside me from the violence and danger that surrounded everything Dante touched. He knew. And Dante Moretti never let go of what belonged to him. I pressed my hand against my belly, feeling the slight flutter of movement that had started just last week. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the child, who didn't yet know what it meant to be born into this world, into this war between freedom and possession. "I'm so sorry." My phone buzzed in my pocket, once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. I didn't need to look at it to know who was calling, to know that even now his resources were mobilizing, his network activating, his empire shifting its focus to a single objective, finding me. The train rattled through the tunnel, carrying me toward a destination I'd chosen at random, toward a temporary safety that I knew, with the certainty of someone who'd once been married to the most dangerous man in New York, wouldn't last the night. Because Dante had seen me, had seen the evidence of what I'd kept from him. And there was nowhere in this city, maybe nowhere in this world, where I could hide from a man who commanded shadows like other men commanded armies. The question wasn't if he would find me. The question was what he would do when he did. The apartment I'd been renting for the past 3 months was in Brooklyn, tucked above a Korean grocery store in a neighborhood where people minded their own business, and sirens were so common they'd become white noise. It wasn't much. A studio with water-stained ceiling tiles, a radiator that clanked like it was trying to communicate in Morse code, and a window that overlooked a fire escape decorated with someone else's dying plants, but it was mine. Or at least, it had been mine for the few hours before Dante discovered my secret. I climbed the 4 flights of stairs slowly, my hand gripping the railing that wobbled under my weight. Every shadow felt threatening now. Every footstep in the hallway made my pulse spike. I'd stopped at a bodega 2 blocks away to grab my emergency bag, the one I'd kept packed since the day I left him, filled with cash, a fake ID, and enough supplies to disappear for a few days if necessary. The thought of running again made my chest tight. I was so tired of running. My hands shook as I unlocked the 3 deadbolts I'd installed myself. The apartment was exactly as I'd left it that morning. Sparse and temporary, nothing on the walls, minimal furniture, everything chosen for how easily it could be abandoned. The only personal touch was a small ultrasound photo taped to the mirror by the bathroom, the grainy black and white image showing the curve of a tiny spine, the shadow of a head. I locked the door behind me and immediately began packing, clothes thrown into a duffel bag. Toiletries swept from the bathroom counter. The few books I'd allowed myself, remnants of the person I'd been trying to become, someone who read poetry instead of counting exits, who fell asleep without checking the locks 3 times. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since the subway. 17 missed calls, all from unknown numbers. Dante was too smart to call from his own phone, too aware of how easily communications could be traced or intercepted. But I knew it was him. Knew that behind each blocked number was his voice, his anger, his questions. Why didn't you tell me? How far along are you? Did you really think you could hide my child from me? I silenced the phone and shoved it to the bottom of my bag. Maybe I'd ditch it entirely. The knock on the door stopped my heart. Not a knock, actually. A single, controlled rap of knuckles against wood, the kind of knock that carried authority, that expected to be answered. Mia. His voice came through the door, low and controlled in a way that was somehow more terrifying than if he'd been shouting. I know you're in there. I can hear you breathing. Impossible. The door was solid, the walls thick. But with Dante, nothing was impossible. He had resources I couldn't begin to comprehend, technology that seemed like something from a spy film, and most importantly, he had the kind of power that made people tell him everything he wanted to know. Go away, I said, hating how my voice trembled. You have no right to be here. Silence. Then, so quiet I almost didn't hear it, a sound that was almost like a laugh, but there was no humor in it. No right? Mia, you're carrying my child. I have every right. We're divorced. You signed the papers. A technicality I'm already having corrected. His voice remained calm, patient even, but I could hear the steel underneath. I have 3 lawyers working on it right now. The divorce was processed in record time, suspiciously quick, actually. I'm guessing you had help. Someone who knew how to expedite the paperwork. Maybe someone who owed you a favor. Doesn't matter. It won't hold up under scrutiny. My stomach dropped. I had gotten help. From a paralegal who hated the Moretti family, who'd lost her brother to their violence. She'd processed everything quickly, quietly, before Dante's people could interfere. But if he was already challenging it, even if you invalidate the divorce, I'm not coming back to you. Then we'll discuss that. But you will open this door, Mia. One way or another. I looked at the door. Solid steel, multiple locks. A security chain. I'd chosen this apartment specifically because it was defensible, but I'd chosen it to defend against random criminals, not against Dante Moretti. If I don't, then I'll have my men clear this floor. They'll evacuate every apartment, tell people there's a gas leak, or a fire hazard, or whatever excuse gets them out safely and quickly. Then they'll break down this door. He paused. I'd rather not traumatize the neighbors, or damage your things, but I will if necessary. You're insane. No, cara mia. I'm a father who just discovered his child exists, and there is nothing, absolutely nothing I won't do to protect what's mine. My hand went to my belly instinctively. The baby kicked, as if responding to his father's voice through the door, through my flesh. A tiny flutter that felt like betrayal. I'm not yours anymore, I said, but even I could hear how weak it sounded. You'll always be mine. The divorce papers were just a temporary delusion I allowed you to entertain. I thought you needed space, time. I thought you'd come back on your own. His voice dropped lower, intimate in a way that made my skin prickle with memory. But this changes everything. You should have told me, Mia. You should have told me the moment you knew. So you could trap me? Use the baby to keep me prisoner? So I could protect you both. The emotion in his voice was raw now, unfiltered. Do you have any idea how many enemies I have? How many people would love to hurt me by hurting what I love? And you've been out here, alone, vulnerable, carrying my air. Don't call it that. Don't reduce our baby to some Mafia succession plan. Our baby. He repeated the words like they were sacred. Open the door, Mia. Please. The please undid me. Dante Moretti didn't say please, didn't ask, didn't soften his demands with politeness. But there it was, carried on a voice that sounded almost broken. My hand moved toward the locks before my brain caught up. This was what he did, what he'd always done. Found the weakness, applied pressure, made me doubt my own decisions. I'd spent 6 months learning to be strong without him, learning that his protection came with a price too high to pay. If I open this door, you'll take me somewhere I can't leave, I said. You'll put guards on me, monitor my every move, turn me back into a possession instead of a person. If you don't open this door, I'll break it down, and then I'll carry you out of here unconscious if necessary, because clearly you're not thinking rationally. He paused. But I'd prefer to have a conversation. Like adults. Like the parents we're about to be. We're already parents. I'm 5 months pregnant. Another silence. Longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was strained. 5 months. You left me when you knew? When you signed those papers, when you walked away, you already knew. The accusation in his tone made my eyes burn. I found out 2 weeks after I left. And I knew that if I told you, I'd never be free. He spat the word like it was poison. You chose freedom over our child having a father? I chose freedom over raising a child in a war zone, over watching you conduct business at the dinner table, over seeing bodies removed from our basement, over wondering every night if you'd come home or if someone finally got to you. My voice cracked. I chose to give our baby a chance at a normal life. There is nothing normal about being a Moretti. Our child is already a target, whether you acknowledge it or not. The only difference is whether they have my protection or not. He was right. God help me, he was right. I'd been naive to think I could hide, could raise this baby in anonymity. The moment Dante knew, the moment his enemies knew, and they would know, because secrets in his world were temporary commodities. My child became a pawn in games I didn't understand. I need guarantees, I said finally. If I open this door, if I talk to you, I need promises. Name them. You don't hurt me. You don't force me to go anywhere against my will tonight, and you actually listen to what I have to say. Agreed. And my conditions. You submit to a medical examination by my personal physician. You move to a secure location immediately, and you stop making decisions about our child without consulting me. Those aren't conditions. That's a takeover. Those are the bare minimum requirements for the safety of my child, Mia. Non-negotiable. His voice hardened. You've had 5 months to make unilateral decisions. That ends tonight. My hand was already on the first lock. I told myself I was being rational, practical, that I was choosing this. But the truth was simpler and more terrifying. Part of me, the part that remembered what it felt like to be cherished by Dante Moretti, to be the center of his obsessive attention, wanted to open the door. The locks clicked open one by one. The chain slid free. My hand trembled on the doorknob. No sudden moves, I said. No grabbing me. We talk like civilized people. I'm always civilized with you, Kara. That was a lie. But I opened the door anyway. Dante stood in the hallway, and the sight of him stole my breath just like it always had. His suit was still damp from the rain, clinging to his frame in ways that made him look less like a businessman and more like something dangerous barely contained in expensive fabric. His dark hair was pushed back from his face, water still dripping down his temple, but it was his eyes that captured me. Dark brown, almost black, filled with an intensity that made my knees weak. He looked at me. Really looked at me. His gaze traveled from my face down to my belly, lingering there with an expression I couldn't name. Wonder, maybe. Possessiveness, certainly, and something that looked almost like fear. May I? He gestured toward my stomach. his hand halfway raised. No. His jaw tightened, but he lowered his hand. You're showing more than I expected for 5 months. Congratulations, you're having twins. The words were out before I could stop them, delivered with more bitterness than I'd intended. I watched the information hit him like a physical blow. His eyes widened fractionally, the only outward sign of his shock, though I knew him well enough to see the earthquake happening beneath his controlled surface. Twins, he repeated softly. You've been carrying my twins, and you didn't tell me. I'm telling you now. He moved then, stepping into my apartment with the fluid grace of a predator entering new territory. 2 men materialized in the hallway behind him. Large, armed, watching me with the blank expressions of professional bodyguards. Dante gestured sharply, and they retreated, taking positions at the stairwell. He closed the door behind him with a soft click that sounded like a cell door locking. We stood facing each other in my tiny studio apartment, the space suddenly feeling impossibly small with his presence filling it. The radiator clanked. Rain pattered against the window. And Dante Moretti looked at me like I was a puzzle he was determined to solve. A possession he would never again let out of his sight. Tell me everything, he said quietly. And don't leave anything out. I sat on the edge of my secondhand couch, my hands folded protectively over my belly, while Dante prowled my apartment like a caged animal. He touched nothing, but his eyes cataloged everything. The threadbare furniture, the cracks in the plaster, the single pot and pan drying by the sink. I watched his jaw tighten with each new detail of my poverty, each piece of evidence showing how far I'd fallen from the luxury he'd kept me in. The doctor's appointments, he said finally, stopping by the window. He didn't look at me, just stared out at the rain-soaked street below. Have you been going alone? Yes. His shoulders tensed. And the costs? I have Medicaid now. It covers... Medicaid. He turned to face me, and the expression on his face made my heart stutter. It wasn't anger exactly, it was something worse, something that looked like pain mixed with fury. My wife, carrying my children, using government assistance for medical care. Ex-wife, I corrected, though the word felt hollow. And I'm managing fine. Managing. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're living in a building with broken security, in a neighborhood where I counted 3 drug deals just walking from my car to your door. You're working. He paused, his eyes narrowing. You are working, aren't you? What job lets a 5-month pregnant woman climb 4 flights of stairs? I lifted my chin. I waitress at a diner in Manhattan. The owner is flexible with my schedule. A diner? He said it like I'd announced I was working in a minefield. On your feet all day, carrying heavy trays, dealing with God knows what kind of people. Normal people, Dante. People who don't solve their problems with violence. People who don't protect you. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, kneeling in front of me so suddenly I flinched. His hands hovered near my knees but didn't touch, respecting the boundary I'd set at the door. Look at me, Mia. I didn't want to. Looking at Dante had always been dangerous. Those eyes could strip away every defense I'd built, could make me forget why I'd left in the first place. But I looked anyway, because some part of me still responded to the command in his voice. I failed you, he said quietly. Whatever happened in our marriage, whatever made you feel like you had to run, I failed you. And I'm sorry. The apology shocked me more than anything else that had happened tonight. Dante didn't apologize, didn't admit weakness or fault. In the 2 years we'd been married, I'd never heard those words from him. You kept me in a cage, I whispered. A beautiful, luxurious cage, but a cage nonetheless. I know. His voice was rough. I thought I was protecting you. I thought if I could control every variable, monitor every threat, you'd be safe. But I made you a prisoner instead of a partner. And now? What's different now? He reached up slowly, telegraphing his movement, and cupped my face with one hand. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, and I hated how my body responded to that simple touch, the way my breath caught, the way I had to fight not to lean into his palm. Now I have more to lose, he said. Now I understand what it feels like to think you're gone forever. I've spent 6 months in hell, Mia, 6 months wondering if you were safe, if you were eating properly, if you were happy. His thumb traced the dark circle under my eye. You're not sleeping. Pregnant women don't sleep well. Pregnant women shouldn't have to worry about making rent either. His hand dropped. I'm not going to pretend I'll give you complete freedom. I can't. My world doesn't work that way, but I can give you choices, autonomy within parameters. That's still a cage. Then help me make it bigger. He sat back on his heels, and I saw genuine desperation in his expression. Tell me what you need. What would make you feel less trapped? Because I'm taking you out of this apartment tonight, that's non-negotiable. But where we go, how we do this, that can be a conversation. I wanted to say no, wanted to tell him to leave, to let me figure this out on my own. But I was so tired. Tired of being scared, of working double shifts while my feet swelled, of lying awake, wondering if the baby's father would ever know they existed. I want my own space, I said finally. Not in your penthouse. Somewhere separate where I can have privacy. Agreed. I own a townhouse in Brooklyn Heights, 4 stories, fully secured, but private. You can have the entire upper floors to yourself. I want to keep working. His expression darkened. Absolutely not. You're carrying twins, Mia. High-risk pregnancy. You should be resting, not... I want to feel useful. I want to have something that's mine, that I built. He was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working. What if I set you up with something remote? Something you can do from home, on your own schedule. I have businesses that need legitimate consulting, marketing, administrative work, real work, not make work. You'd be paid fairly, and you could stop whenever you needed to. It was more than I'd expected, more flexibility than the Dante I'd left would have ever offered. Why are you compromising? Because I almost lost you, his voice went rough. Because when I saw you in that crosswalk, when I thought for one terrible moment that you might run into traffic, might disappear again, I realized I'd rather have you alive and hating me than lose you trying to hold too tight. He stood, offering me his hand. I stared at it. That hand that had killed, that had controlled, but that had also touched me with unexpected gentleness in our private moments. Come with me tonight, he said. Let me show you the townhouse. Let my doctor examine you and the babies. Make sure everything is okay. And then, if you still want to leave, if you still think you're better off alone, I won't stop you. But I'm begging you, Mia. Let me at least know my children are healthy. You're lying. You'd never let me leave. I wouldn't make it easy. I'd have you followed, protected from a distance. I'd deposit money in your account that you'd be too stubborn to use. I'd make sure every landlord in the city knew that renting to you meant dealing with me. He smiled, but it was sad. But I wouldn't physically stop you. Not anymore. I've learned that lesson. I didn't believe him entirely. Dante was a master manipulator, and this could all be a strategy to get me somewhere more secure before showing his true intentions. But the alternative was staying here, in this apartment he now knew about, pretending I could continue hiding. And there was the medical care to consider. The diner's insurance was minimal, and I'd been putting off some of the recommended tests because of the cost. If his doctor could examine me, could make sure the twins were developing properly. One night, I said, taking his hand and letting him pull me to my feet. I'll come for one night. Let your doctor check me, and then we renegotiate. One night, he agreed. But his eyes promised more. His hand settled on the small of my back, possessive and protective as he guided me toward the door. I'll have someone pack your things and bring them over. I can pack my own. You're exhausted. And it's almost midnight. Let me take care of this. He opened the door, revealing the 2 guards still stationed in the hallway. Marco, arrange for a team to pack Ms. Russo's belongings, carefully. Everything goes to the Brooklyn Heights property. Mia Moretti, I corrected automatically, then froze. I mean, the divorce was never finalized in my heart. He leaned close, his breath warm against my ear, and won't be finalized in law either, if my lawyers are as good as I pay them to be. The guards led us downstairs, forming a protective box around me that felt both comforting and claustrophobic. The black SUV waited at the curb, engine running, rear door already open. I hesitated at the threshold, staring into the leather interior that smelled like Dante's cologne and money and everything I'd run from. I can still change my mind, I said. You can. He didn't push, didn't pressure. Just waited, his hand light on my elbow, giving me the choice, even though we both knew the choice had been made the moment I opened my apartment door. I got in. The interior was exactly as I remembered. Climate-controlled, soundproofed, luxury incarnate. Dante slid in beside me, maintaining a careful distance, not touching me even though the space was intimate. The guards took the front seats, and the vehicle pulled smoothly into traffic. We drove in silence through the rain-slicked streets. I watched the city blur past the tinted windows, watched the neighborhoods change from shabby to gentrified to wealthy. My hand rested on my belly, feeling the twins shift and move, unusually active tonight, as if they could sense the tension. "When did you find out it was twins?" Dante asked quietly. "Last week. I'd been measuring large, so they did an additional ultrasound." I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the saved image. "Here." He took the phone like it was made of glass, staring at the screen with an expression I'd never seen before. Vulnerability. Wonder. His finger traced the outline of the two small forms curled together in my womb. "They're perfect," he whispered. "They're the size of bell peppers, and they're making me crave pickles at 3 a.m. "Pickles and what else? What are you craving?" "Ice cream. Specifically Cherry Garcia with extra fudge. And sometimes I wake up desperate for my mother's carbonara, which is ridiculous because she's been dead for 8 years, and I can't recreate her recipe." "I'll find someone who can." He was still staring at the ultrasound. "I'll hire every Italian chef in New York until we find one who makes it exactly right." "That's excessive." "That's me caring for my family." He looked up, meeting my eyes. "Do you know the genders?" "Not yet. I didn't want to find out alone." The admission hung between us, heavy with implications. I hadn't wanted to know alone, had wanted somewhere deep down, for their father to be there when we discovered who these babies were. "We'll find out together then," Dante said. "At your next appointment, which will be with Dr. Castellano. He's the best maternal fetal specialist in the state." "Dante, I already have a doctor, who didn't catch that you were carrying twins until 5 months. Dr. Castellano uses the latest imaging technology. He'll monitor you weekly, make sure there are no complications." His hand moved to cover mine on my belly, and this time I didn't pull away. "Please, Mia. Let me do this. Let me make sure you're all healthy." The SUV pulled up to a townhouse in Brooklyn Heights, and even through the rain I could see it was beautiful. Red brick, black shutters, ivy climbing the walls. Lights glowed in the windows, warm and inviting. "You said you owned this?" I asked. "I bought it 2 months after you left." I thought. He stopped, jaw tightening. "I thought maybe if I had somewhere that wasn't the penthouse, somewhere without those memories, you might consider coming back." He'd been preparing for my return. Even believing I was gone, he'd been building a place for me. The guard opened my door, holding an umbrella. Dante's hand settled on my lower back again as we walked up the steps. The front door opened before we reached it, revealing a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and flour on her apron. "Mrs. Chen," Dante said. "This is Mia. She'll be staying here." "Welcome home, dear," Mrs. Chen said warmly. "I've prepared the master suite and have soup on the stove if you're hungry." Home. The word echoed in my chest, dangerous and tempting. Dante guided me inside, into warmth and the smell of something delicious cooking. And as the door closed behind us, sealing out the rain and the cold and the world beyond, I felt the first crack in the wall I'd built around my heart. This was a mistake. I knew it was a mistake, but I was so tired of being strong alone. The master suite occupied the entire 3rd floor, and it was nothing like the cold marble palace I'd escaped from 6 months ago. Here, everything was soft. Cream-colored walls, warm hardwood floors, furniture that looked comfortable rather than expensive. French doors opened onto a small balcony overlooking a private garden, and through the rain I could see string lights wrapped around tree branches, a stone fountain, carefully tended flower beds dormant for winter. "It's beautiful," I admitted, running my hand along the back of an overstuffed reading chair positioned by the window. "Dr. Castellano will be here in 20 minutes, Dante said from the doorway. He hadn't followed me fully into the room, respecting some invisible boundary. "Mrs. Chen is bringing up soup and bread. You should eat something before the examination. You're not going to hover over the doctor's shoulder the entire time. Would you prefer I didn't?" I turned to face him. He looked exhausted suddenly, the adrenaline of finding me wearing off to reveal the toll the last few hours had taken. There were shadows under his eyes that matched mine, new lines around his mouth that hadn't been there 6 months ago. "You can stay," I said quietly. "They're your children too." Something shifted in his expression. Relief so profound it made my chest ache. He nodded once, then retreated to let me settle in. Mrs. Chen arrived with a tray of minestrone soup and fresh bread that made my stomach growl embarrassingly loud. I hadn't realized how hungry I was until the smell hit me. The diner meals I'd been surviving on, quick, cheap, eaten standing up between shifts, had nothing on this homemade warmth. Mr. Moretti said you're having twins, Mrs. Chen said, setting the tray on the small table by the window. My daughter had twins. Exhausting, but wonderful. You'll need your rest and good food. I'll make sure you have both. You don't have to. Of course I do, dear. It's what I'm here for. She patted my hand with a gentleness that reminded me achingly of my own mother. Now eat. Dr. Castellano is very thorough, and you'll want energy for all his questions. She left me alone with the soup, and I ate mechanically at first, then with increasing hunger as my body remembered what real food tasted like. I was scraping the bottom of the bowl when Dante knocked softly on the doorframe. He's here. Dr. Castellano was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with graying temples and the calm competence of someone who'd seen everything. He set up a portable ultrasound machine with efficient movements, while his nurse, a woman named Sophia with warm brown eyes, took my vital signs. Your blood pressure is elevated, Sophia noted, frowning at the reading. Are you under stress? I almost laughed. You could say that. Mrs. Moretti has been living independently for the past 6 months, Dante said from his position by the wall. His voice was carefully neutral, but I heard the edge underneath. Working full-time, minimal prenatal care. I've had prenatal care, I protested. I've been to all my appointments. At a clinic, Dante said, with rotating doctors who don't specialize in high-risk pregnancies. Dr. Castellano held up a hand. Let's focus on the present. Mia, I'm going to do a comprehensive examination, ultrasound, blood work, check both babies' positions and development. This is going to take about an hour. Are you comfortable with Mr. Moretti staying? I looked at Dante. He stood rigid against the wall, hands clasped behind his back like he was physically restraining himself from interfering. But his eyes were fixed on me with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. He can stay. The next hour passed in a blur of medical terminology and the rhythmic whoosh-whoosh of 2 tiny heartbeats filling the room. Dr. Castellano narrated as he worked, pointing out heads and spines and the curved shapes of developing limbs on the ultrasound screen. Both babies are measuring well for 22 weeks, he said. Baby A is slightly larger, which is common in twin pregnancies. Both placentas look healthy. No obvious abnormalities. And the genders? I asked, my hand finding Dante's without conscious thought. He'd moved closer during the examination, drawn by some magnetic pull, and now stood beside the bed with his fingers laced through mine. Would you like to know? I looked at Dante. He looked at me. And in that moment, we were just 2 people about to find out who their children were. Not a mafia boss and his runaway ex-wife, just parents. Yes, we said together. Dr. Castellano smiled. Baby A is a girl, and baby B. He adjusted the wand, capturing a different angle. Also a girl. Congratulations. You're having twin daughters. The world tilted. Daughters. 2 little girls who would have Dante's dark eyes and his stubborn jaw, and his capacity for fierce, all-consuming love. 2 little girls who would grow up in a world I'd tried so hard to escape. Girls, Dante breathed. His grip on my hand tightened almost painfully. We're having daughters. I couldn't look at him. If I looked at him, if I saw the emotion I heard in his voice reflected on his face, I'd break completely. So I stared at the ultrasound screen, at the 2 perfect little forms that had been growing inside me, secret and safe for 5 months. However, Dr. Castellano continued, his tone shifting to something more serious. I do have some concerns. Your blood pressure is higher than I'd like, and there are early signs of what could develop into preeclampsia. Combined with the twin pregnancy and your stress levels, I'd classify this as high risk. What does that mean? Dante demanded. What do we need to do? Bed rest, for starters. Limited physical activity. No working. Especially not jobs that keep you on your feet. Monitoring at least twice weekly. A carefully controlled diet. And most importantly, he looked between us. Stress reduction. Whatever's causing the elevated blood pressure needs to be addressed. She's moving in here, Dante said immediately. Full-time care. Whatever she needs. I haven't agreed to that. I protested weakly, but my heart wasn't in it. High risk. Our daughters were at risk because I'd been too stubborn, too determined to maintain my independence. Mia. Dante's voice was gentle but firm. This isn't about our issues anymore. This is about keeping you and our daughters safe. Please. Dr. Castellano packed up his equipment while Sophia drew blood for additional tests. They left us with strict instructions about rest and diet, appointments scheduled for twice-weekly monitoring, and prescriptions for vitamins and blood pressure medication. When the door closed behind them, silence fell like a weight. You should rest, Dante said finally. It's late, and you've had a shock. We both have. I shifted on the bed, suddenly aware of how exhausted I was. The adrenaline had long since faded, leaving only bone-deep weariness. Daughters. I kept imagining boys. Don't know why. I never let myself imagine at all. He moved toward the door, giving me space. I didn't know they existed until 6 hours ago. I'm still processing that I'm going to be a father. You're already a father. You just didn't know it yet. He paused at the threshold, his hand on the doorframe. I would have been there. For every appointment, every milestone, every craving at 3 a.m, you robbed me of that, Mia. The accusation stung because it was true. I know. I'm sorry. Are you? Or are you just sorry I found out? Both. I met his eyes. I'm sorry you missed those months, but I'm not sorry I left, Dante. I'm not sorry I tried to build a different life. Even though that life was killing you, even though the stress was putting our daughters at risk, I didn't know. You knew you were exhausted. You knew you were scared. You knew you were alone when you should have had an army of people making sure you were safe and healthy and cared for. He stepped back into the room, and the intensity in his gaze pinned me in place. Your independence almost cost us everything. And your possessiveness is what drove me away in the first place. I know. The words exploded out of him. I know I suffocated you. I know I treated you like a treasure to be locked away instead of a person with her own needs and desires. I know I failed you in every way that mattered. But you're carrying my children, Mia, my daughters, and I will burn this entire city to the ground before I let anything happen to them. To any of you. The fire in his voice, the absolute conviction, it was terrifying and intoxicating in equal measure. This was the Dante I'd fallen in love with, the one who loved with an intensity that bordered on madness. But it was also the Dante who'd caged me, who'd confused protection with possession. I need you to understand something, I said carefully. If I stay, if we try to make this work, it can't be like before. I won't be kept in a tower while you conduct your business. I won't be shut out of decisions that affect my life. I'm listening. I want honesty. Not protection from the truth, but actual honesty about your world, your business, the dangers we face. I want to be a partner, not a possession. That's asking me to show you the darkest parts of who I am. I already know the darkest parts. I lived in your house for 2 years. I heard the phone calls, saw the blood on your shirts that the dry cleaners couldn't quite remove. I know what you are, Dante. What I don't know is if you can trust me with that knowledge instead of hiding it behind locked doors. He was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then he crossed the room and knelt beside the bed, taking both my hands in his. I'll try. I can't promise perfection. My instincts will always be to protect you by keeping you ignorant. But I'll try to be honest, to include you in decisions. To treat you like the intelligent, capable woman you are instead of something fragile to be wrapped in cotton wool. And if it becomes too much, if I can't handle your world, then we find a middle ground. But you don't run, Mia. No more running. No more disappearing in the night. If you're unhappy, if you're scared, if you need space, you tell me. And we work it out together. That goes both ways. If I see you slipping back into old patterns, I'm calling you on it. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You always did. It was one of the things I loved most about you. You never let me get away with anything. Loved. Past tense. The word created an ache in my chest. Get some rest, he said, standing. I'll be in the room across the hall if you need anything. Mrs. Chen will be here by 6 with breakfast, and Dr. Castellano wants to see you again in 3 days. Dante? I called as he reached the door. Thank you for not forcing this. For giving me choices. I learned that forcing you only drives you away. He looked back, and the vulnerability in his expression caught me off guard. I can't lose you again, Mia. I barely survived it the first time. Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the 2 lives growing inside me. I lay back against the pillows, my hands on my belly, feeling the girls move. Our daughters. 2 little lives that would bind me to Dante forever, that had already drawn me back into his orbit despite all my efforts to escape. Your father is going to spoil you rotten, I whispered to them. He's going to be overprotective and overbearing and absolutely impossible, but he'll love you with everything he has. Just like he loved me, loves me. A traitorous voice in my head corrected. Present tense. Because men like Dante Moretti didn't stop loving. They just learned to live with the pain of distance. I closed my eyes, exhaustion finally claiming me. Tomorrow I'd worry about what staying meant, about whether I was making a terrible mistake. Tonight, I let myself feel safe for the first time in 6 months. Even if that safety came with a price, I wasn't sure I could afford to pay. 3 weeks passed in a strange domesticity that felt both foreign and achingly familiar. True to his word, Dante gave me space. He stayed in the room across the hall, knocked before entering any space I occupied, asked permission before touching me even casually. But his presence was everywhere, in the fresh flowers that appeared daily in my room, in the prenatal vitamins laid out each morning beside my breakfast, in the sound of his voice drifting up from the study below as he conducted business calls in rapid Italian. Mrs. Chen became my constant companion, monitoring my meals and rest periods with gentle tyranny. Dr. Castellano visited twice weekly, each appointment showing our daughters growing stronger, healthier. My blood pressure stabilized. The signs of preeclampsia receded. My body, relieved of the constant stress and physical labor, began to thrive. But my heart remained caught between past and present, between the freedom I'd craved and the security I'd found myself desperately needing. It was during the 4th week, on a cold December afternoon with snow falling softly outside, that everything changed. I was in the library, a room I'd claimed as my own, filled with books and comfortable chairs and a view of the garden, when Dante knocked on the open door. He wore dark slacks and a charcoal sweater, his hair slightly disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. Stress radiated from him in waves. "We need to talk," he said. My stomach clenched. Those 4 words had never preceded anything good. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's... He stopped, jaw working. "I need to show you something, to be honest with you, like we agreed." He led me downstairs to his study, a room I'd never entered in all my time at the townhouse. The door required a fingerprint scanner and a code to unlock. Inside, it was exactly what I'd expected. Leather furniture, dark wood, computer monitors showing security feeds from around the property. But it was the wall of photographs that stopped my heart. Pictures of me, hundreds of them. Walking to the diner where I'd worked, grocery shopping, sitting in the park reading a book, everyone dated and time-stamped, spanning the entire 6 months I'd been gone. "You were following me," I whispered. "The whole time. I needed to know you were safe." He stood behind me, close enough that I could feel his body heat, but not touching. "After you left, I was losing my mind. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on business. My people were getting concerned. So I had you followed, just to watch, to make sure you weren't in danger." "That's insane, Dante." "I know. But look." He pointed to a photo dated 2 months ago. Me standing outside a clinic, hand on my barely visible belly. I knew, Mia. Not consciously, but part of me knew. My men reported you'd been to a women's clinic multiple times. I told them to back off, that you had a right to privacy, but some part of me understood what that meant. I turned to face him. "Why are you showing me this now?" "Because someone else knows." His expression went dark. "Carlo Vittore, one of my oldest enemies. He's been consolidating power while I've been distracted. Yesterday, one of my informants warned me that Vittore knows about you. About our daughters." Fear iced my veins. "How?" "He has people everywhere, just like I do. He found out you were pregnant, that we were living here together, and now he's making threats." Dante's hands clenched into fists. "He wants access to certain shipping routes I control. If I don't comply, he's threatened to hurt you, to hurt our babies. So give him the routes. It's not that simple. Those routes are how I keep drugs out of certain neighborhoods, how I protect innocent people from worse criminals than me. If I give them to Vittore, hundreds of people suffer. But if I don't..." His voice cracked. "I can't let him hurt you." I sank into a chair, my hands automatically going to my belly where the girls were doing their evening gymnastics routine. "What do we do?" I'm handling it. I have a meeting with him tomorrow night. Neutral ground, mediators present. I'm going to negotiate something that protects both you and those roots. He knelt in front of me, taking my hands. But I need you to do something for me. What? Marry me. Again. Properly this time. I stared at him. You want to get married while some criminal is threatening to kill me? I want to marry you, because if something happens to me tomorrow night, I need to know you and our daughters are legally protected. My will, my assets, my legitimate businesses, they're all set up to transfer to my wife, not my ex-wife. If we're married, you inherit everything. You'll have the resources and the connections to protect yourself and the girls. If something happens to you, Dante, what aren't you telling me? Vittore is unpredictable, violent. The meeting could go wrong, and if it does, I need to know I've done everything possible to keep you safe. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opening it to reveal the ring I'd left behind 6 months ago. The 3-carat diamond caught the lamplight, throwing rainbow prisms across the walls. I know I have no right to ask this. I know I haven't earned back your trust. But please, Mia, let me protect you the only way I can. I looked at the ring, at the man holding it, at the photographs on the wall showing 6 months of obsessive surveillance. This was madness. I should say no, should demand he find another way, should refuse to be pulled back into a marriage that had nearly destroyed me. But I looked at his face, at the fear poorly hidden behind his controlled expression, at the desperate love in his eyes. And I couldn't say no. Okay. I whispered. I'll marry you. Relief flooded his expression. He slid the ring onto my finger with trembling hands, then pressed his forehead against our joined hands. Thank you. God, Mia. Thank you. But I have conditions. He looked up. Anything. You don't go to that meeting alone. You take every precaution. You wear a vest. You bring your best people. You have backup plans for your backup plans. I will. And when this is over, when Vittore is handled, we talk about what our marriage actually looks like. We build something new, not what we had before. I want that too. He stood, pulling me up with him. I'll make the arrangements. Judge Martinez owes me a favor. He can marry us here tonight. Tonight. I'm not taking chances with your safety, Kara. Not anymore. 4 hours later, I stood in the library wearing a simple cream dress that Mrs. Chen had somehow procured, my hair loose around my shoulders, holding a bouquet of winter roses. Judge Martinez, a dignified man in his 60s who very carefully didn't ask questions, stood before us with his wife as witness. Dante wore a black suit, no tie, looking simultaneously like a groom and a man preparing for war. He took my hands as the judge began the ceremony, his thumb tracing circles on my skin. A nervous tell I'd never seen before. Do you, Dante Moretti, take Mia to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do, for the second time, and if she'll have me, for every time after that. And do you, Mia Russo, take Dante to be your lawfully wedded husband? I looked at him, really looked at him, at the man who'd caged me and freed me, who'd hurt me and healed me, who was the father of my children and my greatest love, and my deepest fear all wrapped into one impossible person. I do. The judge pronounced us married, and Dante kissed me with a gentleness that made my eyes burn. It wasn't the passionate, consuming kiss from our first wedding. This was softer, more careful, like he was afraid I might break. When we pulled apart, he pressed his forehead to mine. Whatever happens tomorrow, know that I love you, that I've always loved you, even when I was too stupid to show it properly. Nothing's going to happen tomorrow, I said fiercely. You're going to handle Vittore, and you're going to come home to me and our daughters. That's non-negotiable. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's my girl, still giving orders. Judge Martinez and his wife left discreetly. Mrs. Chen brought champagne, sparkling cider for me, the real thing for Dante, and toasted our happiness before retreating to give us privacy. We sat together on the library sofa, my head on his shoulder, his hand resting on my belly where our daughters slept. The snow continued to fall outside, coating the garden in white silence. Tell me their names, Dante said quietly. I know you've been thinking about it. I was thinking, Isabella, for my mother, and Lucia, for yours. His breath caught. You'd name one of our daughters after my mother? She was kind to me, One of the few people in your world who treated me like I mattered, not just as your possession. I laced my fingers through his. I thought she'd want to be remembered. She would have loved you even more for this. He kissed my temple. Isabella and Lucia Moretti. It's perfect. We stayed like that until past midnight, talking in quiet voices about nursery colors, and whether the girls would have his temper or mine, about everything and nothing, building a future in words, as if speaking it aloud could make it real. When exhaustion finally claimed me, Dante carried me upstairs to the master suite. But instead of leaving me at the door like he had every other night, he hesitated. Stay, I said, just for tonight. I don't want to be alone. He removed his jacket and shoes and lay beside me on top of the covers, careful not to crowd me. I turned into him, seeking the warmth and solidity I'd denied myself for months. His arms came around me, holding me like I was precious, like I was his entire world. I'm sorry, he whispered into my hair, for everything I did wrong, for making you feel like you had to run, for not being the husband you deserved. I'm sorry too, for not trying harder to fix things, for keeping your daughters from you. We'll do better this time. We have to. For them. I fell asleep to the sound of his heartbeat, steady and strong beneath my ear, and when I woke in the gray light of dawn, he was gone. A note on the pillow saying he'd be back before dinner, that he loved me, that everything would be fine. But I knew Dante too well to miss the lie. I spent the day in anxious motion, unable to settle. Mrs. Chen tried to distract me with nursery planning, but I couldn't focus. Every car that passed made my heart jump. Every phone call made my stomach clench. At 6 o'clock, my phone rang. Unknown number. Mia Moretti? A professional female voice. This is Lenox Hill Hospital. Your husband has been admitted. You're listed as his emergency contact. The world tilted. What happened? He's stable. Gunshot wound to the shoulder. He's asking for you. I didn't remember the drive to the hospital. Didn't remember Marco, one of Dante's guards, appearing to drive me. Mrs. Chen coming along to make sure I stayed calm. All I knew was terror, sharp and consuming, at the thought of losing him. The hospital corridors blurred past. Then I was in his room, and there he was, sitting up in bed, his shoulder bandaged, his face pale but alive. So beautifully, impossibly alive. Vittore, I demanded, being handled by people much angrier than me. His voice was rough with pain and exhaustion. He pulled a gun during negotiations, shot me before my people could intervene, but he's in federal custody now. Turns out he was wanted for multiple crimes, and my lawyer made sure the FBI knew exactly where to find him. I wanted to scream at him, wanted to rage about the danger, about the risk. But instead, I crossed to the bed and very carefully wrapped my arms around him, mindful of his injury. You came back, I whispered. I promised I would. His good arm came around me, holding tight. I'll always come back to you, Mia. Always. The next 3 months passed in a blur of healing and preparation. Dante's shoulder recovered fully. The threat from Vittore dissolved as he faced federal prosecution. The townhouse transformed as we prepared for the twins. Nurseries painted in soft yellows and greens. Cribs assembled. Tiny clothes washed and folded. And slowly, carefully, we rebuilt what had broken between us. Dante kept his promise about honesty, including me in business decisions that affected our safety. I learned to voice my needs instead of suffering in silence. We fought sometimes, passionate arguments that ended in passionate reconciliation. But we fought fair, and we fought as partners. When my water broke on a sunny March morning, Dante drove me to the hospital with steady hands but wild eyes. Dr. Castellano met us there, calm and competent, and after 8 hours of labor, Isabella arrived first, screaming her outrage at the world. Lucia followed 12 minutes later, quieter, but watching everything with dark eyes that were pure Dante. I held them both, one in each arm, and watched my husband cry for the first time. He sat beside the bed, touching their tiny hands with wondering fingers, murmuring promises in Italian about protection and love, and how he'd give them the world. We did good, I said softly. We made perfect miracles. He looked up, eyes shining. Thank you, Mia, for coming back, for giving me another chance, for trusting me with the most precious things in my life. Thank you for finding me in that crosswalk, for being too stubborn to let me go. He leaned in, kissing me softly, carefully, like I was made of glass. I'll never let you go again, any of you. Good, I whispered against his lips. because you're stuck with us now, all three of us. Outside, snow began to fall again, coating the city in white peace. But inside, we were warm. A family forged from broken pieces, built on second chances, held together by a love that had survived everything. It wasn't the fairy tale I'd dreamed of as a girl. It was better, real and flawed and fiercely fought for. It was ours, and that made it perfect.